Hello and welcome again. My name is Alexander. Today I would like to show you my part 3 of my Taming the Edges demo series. The focus of today's demo is really around how to utilize existing Docker containers and make them available in a new way as a new application through the IBM Edge Application Manager. So for this purpose, I'm again using my NVIDIA Jetson Nano as my edge device, which is standing beside me on my desk as my edge platform. And I'm going to use two existing Docker containers. One is a Node-RED Docker container. It's more or less based on a base container, slightly customized with a custom flow, Node-RED flow. And the second container is my own created Docker container, which contains the IBM Informix Edge IoT database and the Grafana visualization component, together with my own developed Grafana adapter for Informix. I'm then creating out of those two existing containers, which I also have registered as two separate services with the Edge Application Manager as standalone services. I'm combining them into kind of a meta service by creating a service, in this case called Node-RED Informix. So this is not a new container, it's just a definition in the Edge Application Manager that those kind of two containers, Docker containers, relate with each other and kind of are dependent to each other. And by defining this kind of dependency, I'm also implicitly getting a Docker network connection between the two containers, which allows me to easily send MQTT-based data from the Node-RED container to the IBM Informix database for later processing and visualization. And in order to have some data for my demo, I'm connecting in my demo case specifically now to some weather data provided by the weather company. So I'm using the REST APIs from the weather company to read out some weather data over the last few hours. Those kind of data could be from any other source, could be from machinery in a production environment, could be from farming equipment, it could be from any vehicles like ships or trains, cars, whatever. So again, it's just for demo purposes. I'm using those kind of weather data and just to show you how it's working. So, and this new service, the combined Docker containers, will be deployed then using the means of the IBM Edge Application Manager in the IBM public cloud located in Frankfurt to my edge device here located close to Munich. Actually, my device is eventually pulling those services as soon as there's an agreement negotiated between the Edge Application Manager and the device. And I'm still then retrieving the weather data from the edge device. So how did I actually create the new combined meta service? I created a service definition file. I'm not going to do much in detail right now. I will do this later in a more lengthy and detailed medium.com blog article eventually. So have a look at the two blue highlighted entries. Those are referring to my base services, the Node-RED demo service below, and in the upper section, the Informix IoT service. And notice that the Informix IoT service has been defined as a required service. So there's a dependency between Node-RED and Informix IoT, which implicitly creates me automatically during deployment time a Docker network between the two containers, which allows me to easily reference the Informix Grafana container by the name of Informix IoT. So I don't have to trick around with any kind of host name, so I can just refer to the Informix Docker container, the Informix Grafana Docker container by the name of Informix IoT. So with the CLI command Horizon Exchange service publish, I'm registering this new meta service against the Edge Application Manager. And if I do a Horizon Exchange service list, it's listing my existing services. I kind of edited this list a little bit to cut it short for readability, but to focus on those kind of three services which I just mentioned. So the new combined service, which combining the two base services, Informix and Node-RED, into the Node-RED Informix container. And I will show you how to do this later on and how it actually works. This is, by the way, for your convenience, just to show you how to get access to my existing Docker containers, so you can play around with those Docker containers if you want to, even standalone without the Edge Application Manager. And I will put the commands also for convenience in the YouTube note section below the video. Okay, now let's get started. So this is my typical demo environment. So I have 3 different colored windows. All 3 windows are shells and terminal connections into my edge device. So in the green window down there, I normally show you what's actually up and running Docker-wise on my edge device. So right now everything is quiet, nothing is up and running. In the blue window, I'm going to show you any kind of agreement which has been negotiated between the Edge Application Manager server in the public cloud and the edge device. So also what I have done while registering my edge device with the Edge Application Manager, I have defined some properties. So I can have some properties which eventually allows me to, for each edge device, I can set its own properties, like for example location information or other information which might be helpful in order to make a decision on how to deploy an edge payload on an edge application to a certain device, or maybe some additional capabilities like has GPU or whatever. So in this case, and you will see very soon, I'm executing this command now. Horizon policy list. I'm just listing all the properties which I have set for my device. So some of those properties have been dynamically generated by the Edge Application Manager's agent, which is installed on my device. This is kind of low footprint agent, like Open Horizon CPU or architecture or memory. So I can also use this later on as a qualification constraint to decide on which kind of edge device I'm going to deploy my application to. In this case, I'm using the location information. And notice I'm using the IBM Watson Center Munich as a location. So I'm assuming in this case that my edge device is now standing in the Watson Center Munich. As I said, it's currently in my home office, so it's not completely true. So bear with me. So I'm clearing the screen. And the next step, I'm going to open the web UI to the Edge Application Manager server. The entry screen is typically this kind of graphical screen showing all the connected nodes. Since it's a demo system, it's only showing 3 nodes right now. And to get some better detail, I'm clicking on the list of devices, so you can actually see what's going on. I'm just refreshing this screen quickly. Let's go to refresh, and you notice that my alexkoe NVIDIA node also has a heartbeat in green. So it means my node is now connected to the Edge Application Manager server in the cloud. And it shows a heartbeat every time it's connected to the cloud. As I said in one of the earlier demos, the Edge Application Manager definitely supports disconnected operations of your edge devices. So the edge device doesn't have to be connected, by the way, to the server. You see those kind of properties again, which I just show you on the command line. So those are known and visible also to the Edge Application Manager server and can be used to deploy deployment policy, to make a decision on which device, on this device, to deploy something. Let's have a quick look at the services. Services are like an app store in the Edge Application Manager. And let's just focus on those services I'm using. Let's have a look at the core services like Node-RED Demo and the Informix IoT, the IBM Informix Edge time series database. So those are the base containers. And then this is the Node-RED Informix service, which I have defined based on those 2 core services, so to speak. So I'm combining the 2 core services into a new application which can do much more stuff, which I will show you in a second. So let's go to policies. The policy section, I have all the different policies which allows me to deploy certain applications or services to my edge devices. Let's go to the first entry, which is the policy Node-RED Informix. I'm just going to focus on the constraints section today, because the constraints section defines the rule or the rules on which device I'm going, or which edge cluster I'm going to deploy my application to, or my service to. You notice location in this case is equal to somewhere. If you remember correctly, I have set location, the location property on my device is equal to Watson Center Munich. So to trigger that my application is deployed to my device, I need to change it here in the editor, which I'm doing right now. So I'm setting it to Watson Center Munich. As soon as I'm clicking on Done, the Edge Application Manager server is scanning all attached devices if they fulfill this requirement. Have a look now to the blue window. In the blue window, we're going to see any agreements being negotiated between the server, the Edge Application server, and the Edge device. As soon as there's a valid agreement, a contract, so to speak, between the Edge device and the server, the payload is being executed and started on the device. In the green window, you can monitor actually what's going on execution-wise. So it might take a few seconds because, as you might guess, if that's a large installation, millions of devices, for example, it takes a few times actually to look for the device. Oh, now we have the agreement. The contract is coming up. And you might see the timestamps. And so there's a creation time for the agreement, an accepted time, and also eventually an execution start time. Since there's a slight delay in between, you will also very quickly see that the payloads, my containers, my Docker containers, are already started on the Edge device. So I will give it a few seconds because also the Informix container needs a few seconds ramp up time to make sure that the database is in a consistent state and all the listeners are up and running. But that's just a few seconds. So in order to show you the Edge application, let's switch quickly to the Node-RED container just to show you what actually my flow, my application is doing. I explicitly for this demo avoided to come up with a black box demo. I really would like to show you what's going on behind the scenes. And so I'm opening my Firefox browser again, opening a new tab. I'm now connecting to my Edge device. By the way, the Firefox browser is running on my MacBook Pro. So I'm connecting from a MacBook Pro to my Edge device, connecting to the alexkoe NVIDIA, and the port is 1880, which is the default port of the Node-RED editor typically. And so it's connecting to the Node-RED editor. I'm going to see my flows. I actually have two flows here. Why two? Because I'm connecting to two different REST APIs provided by the weather company. The lower flow is providing me a time series of weather data for the given zip code. The zip code I'm using is the zip code of the IBM Watson Center in Munich. So we're getting the weather data at the time I recorded this demo here in Munich. And for you to actually better to be able to follow what's going on, I'm activating the debug pane on the right-hand side. And I'm also activating one of the debug nodes just to show you what's happening. The other flow, by the way, is retrieving the same data, but just for the last hour. So basically a singleton request for each hour. So this is the API provided by the weather company. So again, as I'm also avoided to do anything automatically. I could have done this by starting up the flow automatically. But as I said, I wanted to show you not a black box demo, but more giving you some backgrounds. So I'm turning on the debug node. And before I trigger the actual execution of the REST request, the REST API request, I'm just show you briefly how it looks like. You don't need to remember all the details. I just to show you those kind of variables which you might have seen in the beginning, like zip code, like hours. In this case, I'm using 23 hours. And the node API key, I need to have an API key in order to get actually access to the REST API, which definitely makes sense. I have to thank you to a colleague of mine here in Germany, IBM Germany, who gave me her API key temporarily. So I just triggered, I'm going to trigger now the trigger node in order to start the request. And by the way, also, there's another route in my flow which is converting the data returned from the REST API interface of the weather company into a format which I can directly inject to the MQTT connector of the Informix database. So, inject the timestamp. You see on the right-hand side the result. I'm getting 46 elements back. I told you 23 hours. In this case, I requested the result for 23 hours, which is the maximum. Since the specific zip code, the station is generating 2 observations per hour, so every 30 minutes. That's 23 by 2, 46. This is just the last entry, which I returned. You see the different JSON elements, which I'm getting back from the weather company. Eventually, I'm going to use the temperature entry, the air pressure entry, and also there's an entry called feels like. There's a feels like temperature based on humidity and also temperature and wind, for example. So I'm kind of then retrieving this data eventually for visualization in my Informix Grafana container. And just to show you that also the other one is working, I'm just clicking again on the singleton one, which is returning just one object from the weather company. Again, just the same structure of the JSON object. And so the station in this case is located in Oberpfaffenhofen, which is west of Munich. Okay, so now we have injected some data into the Informix database running in the Informix Grafana container and the service on my edge device. Now let's have a look. Let's connect now to the Grafana visualization server, which has its port is 3000. All the ports are accessible externally since I exported them and make them available. So I need to log in first of all to Grafana using the admin user and my password which I've provided. And now you can see there's no dashboard. What I could do now, I could manually during the demo build first of all a data source. I connect to the Informix database and also create a dashboard. Again, in order to spend not too much time for this purpose, I have prepared 2 REST API calls in order to first of all create an Informix data source for our demo and also a predefined dashboard, just to avoid this kind of manual intervention for the demo. I'm definitely going to show what's in there, so I definitely would like to play with some open cards here. So this is the first script in order to create the Informix data source in Grafana, and this is just the curl call in order to create this. I'm just loading the content of the Informix IoT DB file. I'm going to show you the content of the file briefly, and then I'm going to execute the command. So I'm just showing you the content of the file. Very simple, again, a JSON document just defining the Informix IoT DB data source based on my own Informix 03 adapter and the connection URL using the REST API of the Informix database running in my container. Okay, so I'm executing this. So I had created an Informix data source, kind of injected it, so to speak. Now have a look at the dashboard shell script. This is creating the dashboard. Since my screen's a little bit crowded already, let's clear it quickly before I cut the file, because it's definitely longer, and I'm going to show you just parts of it. So this defines a Grafana dashboard. And by the way, you can easily create a dashboard in Grafana and export it in JSON and do the same stuff which I'm doing here. That's very simple. Okay, since I have executed it now, I can refresh the screen, and now have a look. I'm getting the weather company weather data demo dashboard. Let's click on it. Okay, I'm clicking it, and voila. You're now going to see the data which I just created. If you look at the timestamps, and if you show the timestamps and also the timing here on my screen, it's about 6 p.m. You will notice it's about 24 hours back. And I have selected 2 different JSON elements. One is the temperature, the other feels like element. I will soon also show you how I selected this by showing you the query behind it. So I can actually select or move the mouse cursor across each element. I can change the time range very quickly for the last 12 hours, for example, in the data. And again, all the data are stored in an IBM Informix time series. So as a JSON-based time series, which makes it very flexible to retrieve the data. And as I said, those kind of data doesn't need to have or doesn't need to be weather data. It could be any kind of production data or whatever, which you're going to monitor from machinery or whatever. So this is just to show you the queries behind. The query is very specific to my Informix adapter, so I won't go too much into detail. It's more like defining the key, which is the zip code, but also I'm also referring to the JSON element in my JSON time series. In this case, it feels like, yes, and temperature. So that's basically it. Again, the idea really behind the demo is to show you how to use existing Docker containers, combine them into a new kind of application. In this case, combining Node-RED container with some flows, accessing data in the weather company, and also having an edge database to store the data and to visualize the data from. Now you can imagine what you could do on the edge by even adding AI capabilities to read out the kind of data stored in the database and do some more sophisticated stuff. Oh, by the way, I just changed back the location information in my deployment policy, which means now The agreement is being cancelled because I don't find any device anymore which has somewhere as a location. So eventually you'll see in the blue screen that the agreement is gone away. And as soon as the agreement has been cancelled by the Edge Application Manager server, also the agent is eventually then stopping and cancelling all the payload activity, basically cancelling all the Docker execution on my Edge device. And you notice everything is gone. So my NVIDIA Jetson Nano is now quiet again and could be used for any kind of new payload. So this kind of concludes my Taming the Edges demo. Oh, by the way, just to show you that it's gone, I'm just refreshing the screens here connected, which I had been connected to my different containers, and you will notice that I'm unable to connect now. Again, my payload is gone. And yeah, this, as I said, concludes my Taming the Edges, or Taming the Edges Part 3 demo. I'm looking forward if you're going to join my next videos as well. Thank you very much.